Okay, everyone, welcome back. This is my third mic of the day, so I'm going to ask again. Can everyone hear me okay? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Everyone's a bit more talkative after lunch. This is great. Thank you. We are now having our next panel discussion. This is the gap, bridging power disparities between artists and providers. We've got a distinguished panel here. We're going to follow the format of the last group because that worked very well, where the panelists introduce themselves, give a little presentation. We will have time for Q&A at the end. I think without any more ado, we're going to go along the line and we're going to start with Victoria. So please, Victoria.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Victoria Tillotson. I'm a white female with a brown bob, which is slightly disheveled because I forgot to pack a hairbrush, which was a bit of a surprise this morning. I'm talent development lead at Watershed, and I, amongst other things, deliver our kind of artist residency program. Watershed is a cultural organisation with a focus on film and creative technology, and it's based in Bristol, which is a city in southwest England. I've made some notes which I'm going to read because I get a little bit nervous in things like this. Watershed is a phenomenal place. It's the only multi-screen cultural cinema in the southwest and one of only a few places outside London where UK audiences can engage with a year-round programme of world cinema. Watershed is also a world leader in art and technology practice and home to the Pervasive Media Studio, a research space that we opened in 2008, founded on an ethos of innovation. We currently gift space to over 190 residents and have a rich network of over 450 creatives. Developing ways to bridge the power disparities between Watershed, the varied communities we serve, and the artists we support is really important to us. And we spend a lot of time considering this, listening to the people we work with and kind of iteratively developing our methods and processes. Today, I wanted to share with you our recent use of random selection in residency recruitment processes, which was inspired by Jerwood Arts, who used random selection to determine the recipients of their one-to-one fund. There's been a growing interest in using random selection to allocate resources in the arts, particularly where a large number of applicants are applying for a small number of awards. Random selection does literally mean selecting from a number of alternatives using a random process, such as rolling a dice, using an algorithm, or picking a name out of a hat. As a process, it has a long history of being used as a simple and fair way of choosing from amongst a number of candidates. I think the area we're most familiar with random selection being used in the UK is in the legal system. Traditionally, juries are meant to be composed of a random selection of citizens. This is intended to make them fair and to minimise the risks of favouritism and corruption. So why did we decide to use it to allocate our residencies? Our main reason when we set out was to reduce the amount of unpaid labour that artists put into writing applications for opportunities, because when we began to look at what we were asking of people, it really was a lot. In previous years, we'd asked applicants to submit a 2-page proposal, which could be written or recorded. Based on informal conversations with applicants, we estimated that the typical applicant spends at least half a day, so about 4 hours, writing or recording a proposal like this. When multiplied out across about 100 applicants, which is what we usually get, that means 400 hours or 10 working weeks are spent preparing applications. On the other side of the equation, the selected artists are paid for their time on the residency. Typically, we can pay 2 artists for 12 days each for a total of 24 days of paid time. This is less than half the amount of time spent preparing applications. A typical artist trying to make a living from opportunities like this would spend more than 2/3 of their time working unpaid, which felt like quite a stark reality to us when we were looking at this in more detail. If you want to look at this balance for your own projects, my brilliant colleague Martin O'Leary built an unpaid labour calculator, which is free to use on our website, and I can find a way of sharing that with you if you're interested. So how do we go about using random selection to address this issue? So our process involves what we call a kind of partial random selection or kind of early random selection. We asked applicants to complete a really short expression of interest form, which basically checks their eligibility. From that pool, we randomly selected 12 applicants. Those 12 applicants were paid a stipend of £200 to complete a proposal and interview. We also had a conversation with each of them to tell them a bit more about the programme and answer any questions that they have around developing their idea or proposal. So that part of it kind of helped with their sort of artistic development of the idea. The expression of interest form took on average 7.8 minutes to complete. We also received 272 applications, which is triple what we'd usually receive. When we started digging into the data a bit more, we noticed that in previous years, 74% of applications came in on the last day before the deadline, and that 20% of those applications were received at unsociable hours, which we kind of defined as being between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. With our modified process, these numbers changed dramatically. Most applications came in well before the deadline, with only 17%, so from 74 to 17, received on the last day. Even better, only 12% of applications were received at unsociable hours. And we also knew those people had only spent 7 minutes of time on it rather than several hours in the middle of the night. The data suggests that it's much easier for artists to incorporate this process into their daily lives, which can be a real juggle of practice, paid work, and family life. We did evaluate the process. Most feedback we received ranged from kind of curious and intrigued through to wildly positive. People broadly felt the process was respectful of their time, and the majority were in favour of us using random selection in future calls. We did receive some negative feedback. Some felt that their ideas were not being valued and that we were not taking the process seriously. Others felt that we were mocking and insulting artists. We take these criticisms really seriously. And I think, we still have thinking to do. It's not a perfect system. And we also have work to do, I think, in communicating the reasoning behind using this and the respect that we have for all those who participate in these processes. We definitely don't feel like we got everything right, but there is a widespread sense that arts funding is a broken system and that experiments like this are a step forward, even if the details aren't perfect. We've recently, in collaboration with Jerwood Arts, just written and today published a random selection how-to guide. We've gathered together learning from a number of brilliant cultural organisations who've recently experimented with using random selection to allocate various different kinds of resources. The publication is free to download, and we hope that it will help others to consider ways to bridge kind of power disparities in selection processes. The random selection guide is on our website, watershed.co.uk/studio, and it's in the process section of the studio website. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Marie-Folle. I'm a white woman in her 30s, short hair, black hair. I'm wearing glasses and a black shirt. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm originally French, so there is an accent somewhere, and probably going to ramble a bit. So it's interesting for me to be talking to you today because I do not run a residency program. I've never run a residency program, and I've tend to wear many hats. I'm also not an artist, so I'm really in a very awkward place right now. But what I do on a daily basis is that I coordinate a program called Keychange, which works on reducing gender inequalities in the music industry, on increasing representation globally, internationally, in that space, and going from gender to a lot of different aspects of underrepresented characteristics in a very big industry that is the music industry globally. Next to that, I'm also a board member of Res Artis, and I used to be, and I'm still a member of On the Move, but I used to be in the board of On the Move, so on providing information to artists and cultural professionals to work internationally. And you heard Johan Vlogs this morning as well talk about it, coming from On the Move. I'm saying all of this because this topic of bridging power disparities between artists and providers is very dear to a lot of aspects of what I'm doing, and what I want to touch upon today in between the other panelists, which are much more on the residency, on the day-to-day, and on the artist side as well. I wanted to touch upon power inequalities and gatekeeping very much, and talking about the fact that we are hearing absolutely beautiful example, especially like from Watershed. This was really interesting on very practical, very concrete example, and we will hear more in the rest. But in a higher, other level where if we try to expand from that and try to implement those processes and those models throughout the residency fields, there are massive inequities and massive different practices that we need to try to bridge, and try to, yeah, I'm going to ramble, I'm sorry. So basically what I'm trying to say is that there are ways, sorry. Okay. So I'm going to start again. I'm very sorry. This is just basically I work way too much. I am really exhausted. I think all of you are. So I was on a panel earlier this year for IFACA, which is the International Federation of Arts Council and Cultural Agency, and talking about gatekeeping, very much similar topic. I was described myself as a gatekeeper on being in the in-between space, making those choices, having to advocate for artists and raise voices and continue advocating over and over again and try to make sure that we are better at what we do, because historically, in the cultural sector and in any sector, we are terrible at making things equitable. We are exploiting each other, and I think the residency space is not foreign to that as well. We are, we talked about it earlier today. There are problematic of access, there are problematic of money as well. We don't have the same resources, and those disparities are very present throughout the sector. There are beautiful initiatives, and that's really what I wanted to underscore earlier. There are beautiful initiatives that are keeping on trying to rethink those models and trying to rethink what the role of residencies are in that space. What does it mean to host? What does it mean to bring people together? But in my perspective, when we do that as residencies, and I say that again, I haven't run a residency, but I used to work at Res Artis for a very long time. So I studied a lot of residencies. We are gatekeeper because we make selection, be it randomized or not, we make selection. We have power, or artists perceive residencies as having power in their career, in their development. And a lot of artists themselves want to run residency, and they take up this power, they take up this room. And this is something that we don't necessarily question because we want to do good, we want to support people, but there is so much to question around this and to rethink if we are not creating more inequalities by doing that, by exploiting ourselves, by exploiting our team. So I don't have solutions. I have thousands of questions around this topic. The more I work into this, the more I question it. With Keychange, we run a talent development program. I've had by now, well, today we are announcing 24 more people who are going to be part of this. So it's about 300 people who have been in that. And we ask for their feedback. We are very hard on selection. We don't do randomized selection at all. But then once they are in, it's basically their space. We organize anything they want. We make sure to put them on, to put spotlights on them. We export them, so to say, in the music industry. And we do feedback forms and we learn from that. And to be honest, like from an organization perspective, we are exhausted because we keep on getting feedback. It's great, it's amazing, but it's really harsh. And we keep on implementing it. And now I have my team telling me like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do it. It's too much. And it's really from artists who are activists and who believe in us, who believe in the movement. And I want to give it back to them and tell them like, hey, you're empowered. Tell us what you want, but do it with us and reshape this with us. And the structure are not there for that because I need to go back to the funders and tell them, hi, all of those people want to do this tomorrow, not in 3 years, tomorrow. And the funders are like, yeah, that's not happening. So all of what I'm saying is, it's very complex. I have so many questions to my co-panelists actually on how do we bring your experiments to the rest of us in the room? How do we, can we learn from that? How do we bridge that gap for all of us without exploiting ourselves and running residencies in the ground or becoming so institutionalized that we are not supporting artists anymore. So those are my questions. I'm happy to hear all of you because basically, as you can hear, I need to crowdsource all of this and I can't do this anymore myself. So that's me.
Greetings, everyone. My name's Zita Holbourne. I'm a visual artist, but a multidisciplinary artist. I'm also a human rights and equality campaigner and a trade union leader. So I'm really going to speak with all those hats on, or I should say head wraps, because I wear head wraps all the time. Just for those who need it, my pronouns are she, her. I'm a mixed heritage woman. I've got long black braids and a bright head wrap and beaded orange earrings that come from Kenya. My arts practice, which combines visual arts, poetry, writing, and I'm a vocalist, is very much centered around equality, freedom, justice, and human rights, culture, identity, and roots. And I combine my arts practice really with my campaigning practice for human rights and equality and justice, particularly for marginalized communities. I co-founded and I'm the national chair of an organization called Black Activists Rising Against Cuts, BARAC UK, which started as an anti-austerity organization focused on the disproportionate impacts of austerity on Black and brown people, people of color, depending on what term you use, what part of the world you're from. But very quickly, we found that hand in hand with the impacts of austerity was deepening racism and deepening injustice. And so our remit broadened. We established 13 years ago now. And we also focus on migrant rights, refugee rights, and the links to climate change and racism and migration. So I have a focus on equality impacts, on discrimination in the arts and culture sector, but I'm also representing artists who are socially engaged artists, who are precarious workers, who are very low paid. The majority of our members are women and are very often marginalized, but are also in the sectors of the arts, working in the type of arts that has borne the biggest brunt of austerity cuts for over a decade, followed by the impacts of the pandemic and now cost of living crisis that we find ourselves in. So our members are working class artists and usually have to do a second or third job in order to survive. And that work tends to be precarious as well. So when we look at residencies, they're often not even, on the agenda because they're so out of reach. And that's a major problem. I have a grown child now, but I was a single parent. I had to hold down a day job as well as do the other things I'm doing. So the concept of even going on a residency, having the finances to do it, manage childcare, and navigate gender, race, and disability discrimination and find a residency that's going to be a safe space for me is very, very difficult and is a struggle. And if you're trying to navigate and balance all the other things that I've talked about, that's very difficult. And I think what I would like to see in residencies is artists centered. And I don't think artists are. If you look at the benefit to the economy of the arts and creative sector, it's billions and billions of pounds that we are contributing to. But socially engaged artists are the least likely people to be the recipient of that wealth. We're more likely to be living in poverty. Somebody else is benefiting from our art, and that can't be right. And residencies have multiple barriers. Very often, to even apply for a residency, you've got to pay a fee. And, you know, looking recently at some residencies, it seems to be around the $30, €30 mark, just to apply. Now, if you're from the global south, that could be 1 week's wages that you're being asked to contribute. But if you're living in the global north, in Britain at the moment, working class people who work are going to food banks to survive. So that could be your weekly grocery bill. So how on earth are you going to be able to give up that money to pay to do an application, which might be quite difficult and challenging in itself, only to not get through anyway? It's not a risk that you can take, and you don't have the money in the first place to do it. So I think that's a major barrier. And I understand that those who are organising residencies also have to navigate the funding issue. But I don't think that artists should be the ones that are bearing the brunt, because even if you're successful and you go on a residency, you're not earning. If you've gone for a month or 2 months, you're not working. So you've got no income. Very often you're asked to pay to go. And I've seen residencies that are charging thousands of pounds. I could go to a nice 5-star all-inclusive hotel in the Caribbean for what people are wanting to charge me to go on a residency. I don't think so. I'm not paying that. You know, if I had the money, why am I going to pay somebody to benefit from my creativity and my skills and talent? Because it benefits the host of the residency to have artists there. There's usually an engagement in the local community, maybe in an exhibition, a talk, etc. But we're not getting paid for our time. We're not being valued as artists. And this is a major problem. We're still in a world where people ask artists, can you do this for us? We want you to create this piece of art, but we haven't got any money, we can't pay you. You wouldn't say to an accountant, would you? Oh, you like numbers, so why don't you do it because you just love numbers? And you wouldn't say to a cleaner, but you'll have it on your CV that you cleaned our 8-story office for free. You know, why are artists treated like they're not workers? There's no respect. So I think that has to be factored in. And accessibility, which is about disability, but it's also about much more. If you're going to a country where there's a language barrier, if you're going to a country that has a far-right presence in it, and you're black or brown person, you've got to think about whether that's a safe environment for you to go to. You're going to a rural place where it's all white, that's another factor that might be a barrier for you and may not be safe. And I think, you know, I see residencies advertised saying, oh no, we don't have, you know, there's a lot of stairs, or there's a lot of walking, or there's a lot of this, and I have a disability. Why aren't residency providers thinking about how can we make our residency accessible? Why aren't they asking artists and consulting artists about what their needs are, rather than putting them off from the first part, because from the first second? Because the language that's used sometimes is, we will expect you to do this, we expect you to do that, we expect you to do the other, rather than it being a reciprocal arrangement where you can discuss what is it you want to achieve together? What does the artist want out of it? What do you want out of it? How can that mutually be achieved for the benefit of everybody, as well as society and the community that you're going to be in? So there are too many barriers for artists. There's the poverty factor, that if you're poor, then you can't even go for it, unless, of course, you go through the funding process. And that's just like another hurdle, isn't it? You've gone through that huge hurdle of applying for the residency in the first place, and then you're going to have to go through it again. If you're neurodiverse, if you've got learning difficulties, if application forms aren't your thing, then it can be very, very hard to navigate the funding thing. And then you don't even know if you're going to get it in the first place. And also there are gatekeepers of funding in each country. In the UK, you know, there's literally one main organisation you can go to. You can only apply for one thing at a time. So if something else comes up, you can't even apply for it until you've got the answer on that one. You've got to wait X amount of weeks. So it's really, really hard. And I think that there needs to be proper equality proofing. There needs to be proper consultation with artists about what their needs are. There needs to be statements of intent in terms of equality, inclusion, being welcoming, being a safe space. And there needs to be much more centering of artists from the very beginning at the point when you start to design the residency, not as an afterthought once you've got it up and running. And yes, all this wealth that's being created from the arts, those who are actually gaining the most are the ones that should be putting into the funding, you know, and helping to support both the providers of the residencies and the artists. And I think that I don't see very much in residencies around the social model of disability. So it's like, okay, well, what are the problems you've got then? Or we'll see what we can do to sort out your problems. No, you need to make the space free, accessible, and an equitable environment so that disabled artists can participate in that space without being seen as somebody with a need, being labeled and othered. And I don't see any, actually, very rarely see any kind of equality statement when I look at residencies saying, you know, this is what we aim for. This is what we are going to do. This is our policy on equality. This is our policy on religion. What are the understandings of different cultures and cultural needs, you know, and that could be down to dietary needs. Like, you know, a lot of residencies say we'll provide some meals, others don't. But what are they doing to see if you need halal food, kosher food, vegan food, whatever it is you need, that needs to be looked at as well, those practical things, because they may seem small, but actually they might be the difference between you thinking, is this for me? No, because the message it's giving out, it's not going to support me in my disability. It's not going to support me in my religion. It's not a safe space because of my race, and you're not even going to apply. And that means that we're really not actually encouraging, supporting, and promoting talent. It's been stunted, it's been stamped down under the ground, and so many talented artists coming through are not getting those platforms, because those platforms that you get from a residency can be quite important in your career, in giving you a profile, giving you opportunities. And that means that who is benefiting from residencies then? Is it white, straight men predominantly that are successful in residencies? And that's one of the things I think is really important. We need data. We need some surveys carried out and data collated, if it's not already out there, sort of on a global basis, to look at who's getting onto residencies, what are the barriers, which groups are underrepresented, and then have a plan of action to address those issues of discrimination, barriers, and underrepresentation. And I've probably gone on for far too long now, haven't I? No? I'll hand it to you though. Thank you.
Okay, so hello everyone. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you, Acme and Res Artis, for inviting me. I'm Lina Ángel. I'm the co-founder of R.A.R.O Buenos Aires, the co-founder of R.A.R.O and the director of R.A.R.O Buenos Aires. And I'm also part of Keychange, that is a group of 36 residency programs that work together in Argentina. I'm originally from Colombia, but I lived in Argentina 13 years ago. I want to say something to start, and is that English is not my first language. So sometimes I'm going to invent some words. You use your imagination because that's the thing. R.A.R.O and Keychange both are non-profit organizations, and I am here to talk about collaboration and self-management, and also to talk about how to create good behaviors between residency programs and making them a safest place. So I'm going to start talking about my own experience. I studied political science, and I traveled to Buenos Aires, and I make a big decision to stop working in politics. I used to work with the actual president of Colombia, and I just let my work and go to Buenos Aires, and I was like all the cultural offer of Buenos Aires, like blow my mind, and I take the risk and start there from zero. So I start as a volunteer in a residency program in Buenos Aires. And when I was working there, I saw that a lot of residents were like going out between them, but all of them don't have any connection with local artists. So I think that it is a big problem that all the residencies maybe have, that sometimes we as a residency program don't create a real connection with the local scene of the city that the artists are visiting. So when I was in one travel, I was in Colombia, and I was trying to explain to a friend, a political scientist, like, what is a residency program? And I was talking about that, and I realized that a residency program is not just a place. A residency program is an experience. So when I go back to Buenos Aires, I talked with two friends, a curator that is from Spain, that is the co-founder of R.A.R.O, and an artist that is from Colombia, that is the other co-founder. And I tell them, like, why don't we create a program that involves local artists? So we start creating a program, and we don't have a space, we don't have a place. We just create connection and agreements with 25, now in Buenos Aires is with 25 local artists. So at the beginning, it was so crazy because I went to talk with local artists to their studios, saying, okay, I'm gonna create a residency program, and some artists are gonna come to your studio and work for weeks, and of course, I'm gonna pay for you. So that is also important, that we try to create jobs for local artists. So for them, was like, this girl is crazy. But at the same time, I was like so like sure about the thing that I want to do. So it was a year for creating the program. It takes a lot of time to connect with local artists and to try to let them understand that we not just want to rent their places, we want to create connections between them and the residents. So that's why I am here, because that experience, like creating R.A.R.O, that is this program that starts in Buenos Aires. It starts in 2014, and R.A.R.O means weird. So I have the book here that it means like residencias artísticas raramente organizadas. If I translate it good, I don't know. It's like artistic residencies weirdly organized. So it's real. It's weird because it's like a big puzzle. For each year, at the beginning, we start having just 3 residents at the year. Now, the last year, we have 34 residents. And we have been growing, and now we have 5 editions at the year. And in each edition, we have like groups between 5 and 10 residents. And it's not about the quantity. Yeah, it's about like the quality of the program that we want to create. So, for example, I'm gonna give an example for you to understand. If you are an artist and you wanna do a residency and you have a project that involves like photography, printmaking, and installation. So you could select different art studios to go to Buenos Aires or to Madrid or to Barcelona to do your project. So when you select that studios, you just don't share with one artist in your residency program. You share with different artists. You are visiting their studios. You are living with them, taking lunch with them. So that is another kind of experience that we want to propose. All that I want to create with R.A.R.O from the beginning, it's a very human residency program, because in my experience, I saw a lot of residency programs that were like machines and then don't think about the human things that is happening behind everything. So yeah, I'm gonna follow my notes. So itinerancy, itinerancy is so important for us because it gives us the possibility to have, like, to connect for real the residents that come to our project with the local artists, with the local scene. In that way, we also think that it's important to generate collaborations, not just between the residents and the local artists, also with other residents. So when I started R.A.R.O, it was very hard because also I am not from Argentina, I'm from Colombia. And when you are not from a place, it's difficult to start. So at the beginning, it was hard, but with time, it starts to be better. And then with the pandemic, then I'm going to introduce a little of Keychange, that is this group of residency. So with the pandemic, we start like talking between all the residencies of the country. So what is happening? So I think that what happens with the COVID was so good because it let us like communicate it. And we start like keep in touch, and we create Keychange, that is this group of 36 residencies of the country working together. And our idea is to avoid all that competition practice and to start really collaborating between us, because we make a lot of encounters and exercise together, and we found that we have the same problems. So we are just like in the same scene, but like all of us trying to get funds and to work separately, and it is more easy if we work together. So in this collaboration with Keychange, that is this group of residencies of the country, we start creating different programs. And me, as a political science, I'm so like focused on get like the legal yeah for each organization, because sometimes in Argentina and in a lot of countries of Latin America, sometimes nothing goes to the legal part, and when you have like a legal organization, you can create more things together. So as R.A.R.O, as Keychange, we create a civil association. It's a non-profit organization, and we start creating a lot of programs together. Last year, we gave a big grant for artists with the same dynamic as R.A.R.O. So the residents were like traveling around Argentina and going to different residencies in the same time. And I think that when you have the possibility to share with different actors of the scene, maybe your experience is gonna be like better. That is my idea. I hope you share it. So yeah, I will go back to talk about R.A.R.O again. The program starts in Buenos Aires. As I told you, I have 2 partners. In 2014, the program starts in Buenos Aires, and then in 2017, it starts in Madrid. And in 2021, it starts to be in Barcelona. And now we are going to start the program in Bogota, where I am from, with the idea of having the same dynamic, to work with local artists and to let them get involved with artists that came from other countries. And I saw a lot of good things that happen in that relationship, because it's like we as R.A.R.O receive the residents, create the connections. Of course, it's not just to go to the studios. We have like 5 editions at the year, and we have like, we invite some curators, we follow every project. But it's important that we also like try to, as I said before, like to talk about all the human things that are behind what is happening. And for that reason, I want to say another thing, and it's like that I start like as a political science, I start like thinking about what is happening behind like the things I create this residency program, but I know a lot of artists that are in some countries where there is a lot of institutional violence. So I connect again with my political partners, and I started working with human rights associations. So create some kind of programs that helps artists that are part of these countries where there is a lot of institutional violence to come to Buenos Aires or to come to Madrid or to Barcelona to develop their projects. So that is part of like the things that I want to talk today about, like how we as an organization could create collaboration with local artists, with institutions, and with other residency programs. Because we usually, or I don't know, in my experience at the beginning, I think that we used to work like separately, and for me, it doesn't have any sense. And talking also about like all the challenges that we have as a program, and talking about the disparities and everything. We talked before creating this panel about mental health. And I want to tell you an experience that I have before that teach me a lot and that makes me change my program. Like 1.5 years ago, I received a residency from Colombia. And he told me at the beginning, I am hypersensible. I don't know how. Hypersensitive. Yeah. And I was like, oh, me too. We can cry together. I don't know, like, but I didn't saw all the things that were happening behind that words. And after 1 week that he was with us in the program, he told me one Saturday afternoon that he has suicide thoughts. So for me was like a red flag. And I was, how I am working in this project for 6 years, 7 years, and I don't think about this kind of issues, you know? So now we create like some ways to talk with the residents in the interviews about mental health. And you cannot imagine how it opened doors to talk about issues. For example, one resident that came this year from Chile, she told me like, no one never asked me about my mental health in an interview. So I want to change my project. Could I change my project? I want to talk about my bipolarity, and I have been in like 300 therapies. So I think that it's important also to let that taboo outside and to start talking about these kind of issues, because a lot of my friends take meds and I don't know, or go to different psychiatrists. So it's too important to start talking about these kind of things. I don't want to forget anything of my, I have time. Yes, sorry, I am a person that talks a lot. I cannot stop. So in that process, I think that it's important to keep in mind that we are human, that we don't have like a story of plants, a store of plants. So it's important to get involved with the other, to think about what is happening, to think about how to collaborate with other residency programs. So for example, now in Quincho, and I go back to Quincho, that is that group of residency programs of the country, we create a manual of good behavior. So we are 36 residency programs, and we see each other every Monday. I'm the treasurer of the group, so it's a big responsibility, and sometimes it's too hard to share with others that have different thinkings, but it's important to go there. So if you don't have a group of residency programs on your countries, I recommend that to you, because it's a good exercise to talk with others that have like the same problems, and because with that you can get solutions together. I hope to be clear, and thank you.
Thank you. That was perfectly timed. One of the things that cropped up during that really interesting discussion was that actually these are quite simple, practical points that any residency can take on board, and that this idea about it being artist-centered, about it being a safe space. But I'm wondering if I could. This is a question that's come to me before the end of this panel discussion. How do you then communicate that you have created an equitable space? Does that question?
Say that again.
How do you communicate that you have created an equitable space? How do you let it be known that that's the space that you have created? Or is it just that you do it and people come?
I don't mind starting with responding to that. Well, as I mentioned before, having a statement of intent, a statement of equality, an equality strategy, an equality action plan, which takes into account not just equality, but wider inclusion, equality and inclusion, and celebrating diversity. I think that needs to be front and center in your communications. So when you're advertising a residency, that's one of the first things you see, rather than these barriers of it's not going to be accessible, you've got to pay for it, you've got to pay for your flights, you've got to get all the equipment you need to get here, we're very isolated and cut off, and get on with it and do the application. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's it, that's a turn off then as soon as you see those things. If the first thing you see is, even if you're saying that you're striving for equality inclusion, you're working towards these things, you welcome input, you welcome feedback, you want to improve. But if this is in your communications, whether it's on your social media, on your website, when you're doing events, even, I come from a trade union background, yeah. So at the beginning of any conference, we would have an equality statement. We would have something that says where to go if you're feeling uncomfortable, there's a problem, or somebody's been offensive. This is the process for addressing that. And that would be in your conference pack. So you know what are the standards of behavior expected of you and of everybody else, and what do you do if those things are breached. So that kind of thing in residencies, would be helpful as well, so that before you arrive, people understand what the expectations are. So it's not just about you who feel you may be on the receiving end of barriers and discrimination, for other people who are not thinking of those things because perhaps they have white and other privilege in the world, to think about their behaviors and how they may contribute to an unsafe and insecure environment for other people as well.
If I may on this, so what we've developed over the last 4 years with Keychange is a code of conduct, which we revise regularly as well. We host meetings with different size of groups, with people coming from different countries, with different different experiences on what gender means to them and how it expresses in their culture and in their languages. So we bring that all together, and we don't talk about creating a safe space, but creating a safer space, because no space is ever safe. So we work a lot on language, we work a lot on this, but coming back to the code of conduct, this is very much on developing a social contract between everyone who enters a space and makes a deliberate choice to go into that space. So to make sure that we come on certain with certain expectation that we can have of each other. And we revise it regularly with input from our participant, with the alumni, to make sure that this remains relevant. I think a big part of what we still have to do with Keychange itself is the self-determination part of it, and making sure that it's not us deciding versus them, but it is us expanding and making sure that we continue growing in that way, and that it's that how the decision is being made, how the texts are being written, that this is more equitable as well. To come back to your question, it's only, and I agree with it, that it's about intention, and then putting it in practice and learning over and over again to make it better. And expectation are important. I mean, stating expectation are important. Communication is important, and making sure, especially in the residency space, we are talking about people. What you were saying is absolutely true. We are talking about people ultimately. So it's about making sure that whoever is in the room actually has a seat at the table. And that we continue creating the space together, and there will be mistakes. It's unavoidable that there will be mistakes. So I think it's also about making sure we continue learning through this, and not be afraid of continuing learning, despite how much it's going to trigger individuals in the room, and also trigger poor relations, and making sure that we all prepare each other, and that we seek training, because there are training that exists to be able to tackle this and be more equipped to know how to handle thinking about privilege in a different way. Okay,
I think now's the time that I'm going to open this up to the audience, both here and digitally. If there are any questions, there are a couple of mics going around, I think, at the back row, at the top of the row.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much. I'm really impressed, and I wish we have 48 hours to discuss this very interesting subject. First of all, I just want to say inclusivity in itself is an activism. And so when we think about this subject and we don't look at it through the lenses of an activism to create an active, inclusive space, we will still be laid back in addressing the situation, because sometimes we are afraid to talk about the subject of inclusivity. In the sense that when we think about it and look at all the menu on our table to create even a space and to start, is kind of sometimes very scary. And I was happy with the first speaker, I guess, because I don't know your name, so pardon me. The person writes to the moderator. When you said that at some point you were criticized and you accepted those criticisms and you begin to work with them, I think that is the very important thing for us, as especially people who create space and think that we are creating space for artists and creating space for others. Because sometimes we can become very complacent, feeling that we are doing favor to artists, and so we are not ready and willing to listen to some of these criticisms, and then we continue with this kind of like, it becomes like a kind of structural violence without realizing how violent it is not to learn and relearn. So for me, I was just thinking about all the things that were laid on this table here, like we have to do to achieve a residency space or to achieve an artist space, to make sure the disabled is there, the queer person is there, the trans person is there, the Black person is there, the mentally challenged person is there. If we think about all these things, like, it's honestly, if we should be honest ourselves, it's very scary. And I think none of us will run a residency in this room. But that is not the main problem. I think what is very important for us is that the urgency to which we are beginning the thing should be our motivation to begin, and then allowing ourselves to unlearn and learn through the process and every single step that is taken. Otherwise, we will not identify these very little things that we never even pay attention to. We will not identify at some point when you realize that For many years, you've been running a residency, but you never even thought about somebody who could be in a space and dealing with this suicidal thought and challenges. And that led you in thinking about collaborating with health facilitators and so on. So I think this is one of the things I think that we as residency directors and runners and artist spaces, we should be considering that in our process, we are also learners. And we are in a journey to discover new possibilities and not become too complacent thinking that we have finished our work and then we are doing favor to people who come to us. That stops us from learning. Because again, when I think about the entire subject of this sitting here, it says designing residency for everyone. The first question that came into my mind is, who is everyone? And I look, I haven't seen everyone. Everyone is missing. Who is everyone? Let's point at everyone. You know, everyone is missing. If we can start thinking this way, who is everyone? And then again, to us, we may be able to answer in our own ways because we have agencies across the continent, across the world, across the countries. And this is one of the key themes that I just want us to reflect on. So it's not a question, but it's like something we should reflect on. As founders, as directors, as space runners, we are still learners and we should be ready to learn and to unlearn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kate West, and I am the Research and Artist Development Lead at E-Street Arts. So I've got a question for Zita, and I'm really sorry, you might not have the answer to this, but we spoke earlier about labour attached to visa applications and the barriers these create to artists engaging in residencies. I'm just wondering what role, if any, has or if it will play in the union's role in lobbying governments for visa reform for arts and culture.
Okay. Shall I respond to that now, or are you taking more questions?
No, you carry on.
Yeah, that is an issue that we are raising as a concern with government and forming policy through the trade union Congress and raising through those routes. The other thing we have here in the UK is the impact of Brexit, you know, and crossing borders, and having access to residencies and initiatives for artists. So a lot of us now in the UK used to do a lot of work across Europe until Brexit. And because the funding comes from the European Union, for example, then if you're based in the UK, then you're not eligible to participate in those projects. So you couldn't even apply in the first place for many of them. So there are a whole host of issues around borders and borders being controlled and the impact on artists, the cost of visas as well. Will prohibit many artists from even being able to think about it, and art shouldn't be limited by borders in our view. It should be that artists can cross borders from one country to another, from one continent to another. We all benefit, every society and every community benefits from that ability to cross borders. I think it stunts talent, limits creativity, means that audiences and communities have less access to the benefits of arts if we can't cross borders. So that is a crucial issue.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, please? Yes, third row. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question to Victoria about the random selection and what difference it made to your programme, if there was a noticeable, I don't know, change in what was shown or what was selected, and what feedback you got from the people who were actually selected at the end.
Yeah, sure. I think that we we ended up with 3 amazing artists who came through the program. They were very much aligned with, you know, what we were asking for in the initial brief that went out. So I don't think that they were kind of necessarily, you know, radically different projects to what we've funded in previous years. But we were really pleased with the projects that came through. I think in the I guess what was different is in the pool, there was like a huge range of like different kinds of people, which, you know, might not have come through previously with a more traditional process. And also we got really great feedback from all of those people in the sense that the process that they'd gone through with developing their proposal had helped them develop their ideas. One of them, for example, had a residency elsewhere near to Bristol, and actually took a detour on the way back from that residency to come and spend some time with us because the process of meeting us and going through it had been so positive, which was really, really great feedback. I think it works really well in a program like this one. The studio really supports research and development of early stage ideas. So, you know, when you're thinking about kind of gatekeeping on a opportunity, it's kind of like, what are you looking for? And in an R&D program, you know, people are very early stage, they haven't, it's just a nub of an idea. How do they know whether it's going to be the best idea or not? And who are we to kind of judge whether it's going to be the best idea or not? So I think the random selection worked really well in terms of us not kind of holding that, because actually all 12 people that we spoke to were all really brilliant and with great ideas. So I don't know if I've answered your question there, but yeah, I think it was really positive, and yeah, the people that we got through were great. If you want to see their work, there's a YouTube channel for Watershed, and we make one of the things that we do as part of the residency is make short films about all the projects to help artists kind of raise further funding to develop them further after being with us. And so they're all on there, so you can see the kind of things that came through. But we were really, really pleased with like the mix of ideas and people we were able to support.
Thank you. Yes, in the middle of the auditorium, someone with their hand up, just in the middle. But yeah, just there.
Thanks. Thank you. Going back to, I suppose, the title of the panel, which is around bridging power disparities between artists and providers. I work as both an artist and a provider, but I'm interested in, I've seen over the years, so many artists have taken on board a sense of power imbalance so strongly that when it comes to them standing up for themselves or asking for things that they need, that they feel sometimes that they can't even do that. And I'm wondering, in your work, it's directed to anybody who wants to pick that up. How do you encourage and support artists to feel like they have the power to ask for what they need?
Don't mind them, yeah.
Lina, do you have an answer for something?
Let me think about it. I don't want to give a fast answer. I think that we as a group, because I don't work by myself, like try always to find a way to like follow the projects, and also to understand where the artists come from. So if we go to understand where the artists come from, maybe we could find the possibilities to help them, or maybe not the word is help them, to guide them to develop their projects. Also, if they think that they don't have the possibility, try to create connections, because that is part of our work as a group. As I told before, I usually work with different institutions or organizations, for example, of human rights. So if I know that there is an artist that have some issues and want to develop some concepts, and at the same time, I know there is some institutions that help artists and people to develop that ideas, part of my job is to create that connections. So that's the way that we try to do it. Maybe not in all the opportunities we get that, but that's the way to help and work in the same moment with them. Yeah.
Can I respond as well?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So knowledge is power, right? So as a trade unionist, one of the things that we do in AUE and across the trade union movement is to provide the tools and the knowledge and the resources and the information for artists to know what to ask for, to know what their rights are. And trade unionism is about collectivism. So trade unions are only as strong as the members that are in them. So it's not a top-down thing with us dictating to our members. Our members are the strength of the union. And so working in collaboration with each other, having trade union structures for equality groups, having trade union structures in different regions or towns and cities, working across trade unions in the creative sector, working with grassroots organizations. So very often in my other role for BARAC UK, I might be working, actually the visa question that came up earlier, BARAC worked with a trade union around some Black musicians disproportionately being rejected when they applied for visas to come to the UK. So that collaborative working, and as you've mentioned, going to human rights organizations, involving other organizations that have that expertise and specialism, mobilizing to campaign and amplify voices, empowers people, because then they're not isolated and they're not alone and they're not fighting an individual battle. Having said that, a lot of my work in the trade union movement is handling cases. So that is when somebody has a particular dispute or issue with a provider or an employer or whatever it is, you know, I can provide that practical support of drafting things, of advising what are your rights, of connecting you to our lawyers, of representing you in a meeting, of supporting you through the process of empowering yourself and challenging what's happening to you. So you're not alone. There is an organization that's standing with you and helping you through the process.
If I may add to that, indeed, adding to that, and I think in it knowing your rights as an artist, but I'm generally, I mean, as a human, but knowing your rights is extremely important, and this helps to feel empowerment, to have someone behind you, just not standing alone. I think from a provider's perspective, on providing programs, providing support, whatever, be it a network, being a residency, the more we strive to provide best practices, to create frameworks in which artists can see, oh fuck, that is possible. Like, this is a reality. This is yeah, one organization trying it. So for the events we run with Keychange, we have breastfeeding rooms, we have quiet spaces. We put this in place. I mean, we ask this, we ask about all kind of access requirement that people might have. We make sure that the spaces are, like, we negotiate this in advance for the people who come to our space to make sure that they can experiment that. And a lot of them are taking it back home and implementing it in their stuff. And it's absolutely amazing to see. And they feel the empowerment on it is possible, like the proof of concept is there. So that's just like offering proof of concepts and again, like try and error. We have been doing this for years, and it's improving year after year. But this is really, it has, from the feedback we've received, that has empowered some people to take this on board and try to do it themselves. And what we do very much is bring people together and creating those networks. So what you were saying on connecting those dots on, okay, you need to be connected to that one. And I think that's really essential for people to know how to grow to the next step. It's not going to be through me. I'm only myself, but this collectivism, this possibility to bring things together and make sure that we go to the next step, that empowers a lot of people who can learn from each other this way beyond ourselves.
Okay, I think we have a question from the online chat, but I'll come back to you in a second. James.
Yeah, so we've got two questions.
Me too.
Yeah, so one's from Patricia Healy McMeans. This question is for Victoria, and it's, what were the questions you did ask on the form?
On the expression of interest form. I'm just trying to remember now. It was basically to check eligibility. So with where the particular funding was coming from to support the residency programme, practitioners for this one had to be based in the UK when the residency was happening, and they needed to be over 18. And there was a few just like sort of practical things like that, which was kind of bound to the funding. And then we did ask people to write 10 words on the project that they would develop when they were with us. That was not like part of the assessment criteria at all, but what we just wanted to make sure is that people had an idea bubbling away, even if it was very unformed, rather than just filling in and then sort of coming up with an idea if they happened to get through the random selection. Because what we were looking for were people that sort of had things sort of bubbling around that coming to the studio to develop would be of real benefit. So we did ask people for just like, 10 words just to say what the project was. And that was basically it. The form did include, we probably put too much stuff in. We want to pare it back if we do it again in future, because what we wanted to do with the form was really sort of provoke people to understand the kind of residency it is. So the studio, you know, it's an open plan space. The residency program is set up so people can share their ideas and process as they go along and chat with the community and get feedback. And so that sort of idea of sharing things at a very early stage doesn't suit everybody's practice.
Yeah.
So we just really wanted people to understand that that's the kind of residency it is, so people could sort of self-select whether this was the right opportunity for their practice.
Yeah.
And that was it really. So we just tried to keep it as minimal as possible, but I think we could pare it back a bit more.
I just like to supplementary in regards of that, and it's in relation to the 10 words.
Yeah.
How did you accommodate with people with dyslexia who are not in that mind to kind of express their views, their ideas in 10 words? How inclusive was that throughout the form?
I think that could be better in future ones, to be honest. And what we really stressed is like, it didn't really matter what the words were. You know, that we weren't judging the words. You know, it could be something as simple as like, I don't know, a robot that uses pollution data.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we weren't asking for anything that was very descriptive or like that would be judged. It was just literally, you know, if you get through this, then we'll ask you to kind of talk to us in more detail about this thing, but we just want to make sure that you are. And we did actually have somebody that changed their mind. So one of the 12 that came through, you know, she put 10 words and then she said to us, actually, I've got 2 ideas and I've put that one, but I really want to do the other one. And so we were like, well, fair enough, go with that one then. Do you know what I mean? So we try to be as flexible as possible.
And there's one more from an anonymous attendee. How do you respond to artists and residents who are overly demanding of staff and resources? Now, artists ask for more than it is equitable or possible. How do you say no without stifling an artist's creative processes?
Oh dear.
So from conversation I've had, and I would be curious of the two residency hosts we've here, but from conversation I've heard, it's a lot about conversations and going into that conversation with the artist and making them understand what the reality of the space is. I think you said it was about this mutual exchange. It's about coming together in that space. Like at the end of the day, it's different. It's different parties coming together and be like, okay, we need to come together, make it work. And if one exploited over the other, the power imbalance goes two way as well. And so a lot goes through conversation, a lot goes through managing expectation at first, but also conversation and continuing this conversation throughout the process, because indeed a lot of time project evolves. And you end up with something different, and that has to be negotiated. So I mean, you can use whatever words you want, but this is a process where there be check-in, and that's the best you can do to avoid and making sure that you're transparent from the host perspective on, this is the resources I have, this is what I can do, this is the much I can offer, and we can explore this further. But
I mean, I really like it when people are demanding, because it usually means that, like, you know, you're really clear about where people are at, you know? But I think it is, I would echo what you're talking about there. It's about a conversation. It's about being realistic about what can be done. So saying, you know, so sitting down and say, like, really trying to understand where somebody's coming from, then looking at actually what the possibilities can be within the sort of space and resource that you've got. But then also, like, what can you access from elsewhere? Because one of the things that we see ourselves as at Watershed is part of an ecology of organisations, particularly in Bristol. So something that we might not be able to accommodate, somebody else in the city might be able to. So we'll go and ask them, you know, we've got this great thing, can you come and, like, maybe chip in and do that? So yeah, I don't know if that answers it very well, but that's kind of our
Yeah, I have to agree that our way to create like a clear conversation with the artist is starting for let everything clear from our website, because that's the first like moment when they arrive to our program and to understand how we work. And as we have like 25 studios, each studio has their own rules. Each studio has their own times, each studio has their own things. So we start for let everything super clear from the website, and then in the interview, we try to make focus on that. So, and to ask, I think that it's very important to ask, to have a clear conversation, like, what are your expectations? Because if you tell me what are your expectations, I will know if I could do the things that you want. Yeah.
Can I say something quickly on this from the perspective of an artist? So this idea of a person being demanding, if you carry Black trauma because of the legacies of colonialism, of enslavement, of lived experience of everyday racism, of systemic and institutional racism, for example, which I do, we are often labeled as troublesome or troublemakers or aggressive for daring to assert our rights, for daring to question things, for daring to raise concerns. And that's how it seemed that we are a problem, rather than the problem is with the situation we're in and the people that have perpetuated that in the first place. So I think that even that question, and no offense to the person asking, because they had their intentions in asking that question, it would be interesting to know what perspective they're coming from. You know, are they a provider? Are they an artist? Because that's the worst thing, that because things aren't in place for what you need, and it isn't equal or safe or equitable for you, whether that's because of disability, sexual orientation, race, gender. The idea then that you're this problematic person because you're trying to make that space a space that you can stay in and continue in is really not acceptable. And that's why, going back to what I was saying, artists need to be centered from the start. The conversations about ensuring the space is inclusive and the provider setting out their strategy for equality and inclusion is crucial.
Thank you. There is 5 minutes, and I know there's somebody here with, oh.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Zita. I think that was an important point to uplift. I just want to get on this, and I would love to hear you all reflect on this word intentions. We typically use the word, we have good intentions, but what do you have in terms of a strategy to tend to that impact of, you may have good intentions, but that may not always land on the artist or the provider or the cultural worker who's on the receiving end of that good intention. And just curious, what is the process of interrogating that as a developer and the designer of a good intentions practice? And Zita, I'm gonna hold you out of that conversation. I'm just interested in hearing from the rest of the panel.
So I just want to make sure I've got your question clear. So you're asking kind of how we make sure that those good intentions.
I have a lot of good intentions, and my wife always says to me, your intentions are really good, but you're not thinking through the impact of me, the receiver, and how that might actually affect how I live and how I experience this moment. So I'm really curious about processes that are put in place that tend to the impact of good intentions to ensure that these good intentions, espoused good intentions, land on the receiving end in a way that it is a good impact.
So I think one of the things that we do during a residency process is we develop really kind of close relationships with the people that come and spend time with us. And we have really regular kind of one-to-one check-ins with people, which covers the kind of project and idea development, but we also check in around, how they're doing. Is there anything we need to change up? What is their experience of the residency? Is there an adequate level of care from what we're doing? And we do that as we go along. We don't leave it till the end in an evaluation form, even though we do ask it at the end in a kind of evaluation survey, but we do it like dynamically throughout, which gives people kind of space and opportunity. And I think because we really try and develop like human trusted relationships with people, I think people do feel like they can be frank with us because people are, as we go through, people do tell us if there's things that's not working, or I guess if those good intentions aren't landing. And then we do actively take that feedback and try and implement change. Or if we can't, have a conversation around that and what might we be able to do instead, or what could those other sort of adjustments be. So I guess that will probably be the closest that I could think of in terms of like how we check in on those good intentions as we go along. But our main concern is that people feel like they have time and space to think and experiment, able to connect with people, feel comfortable, feel like they're being looked after while they're with us, and their experience is centered in the residency process. I don't know if that answers your question.
I want to add something, and it's that, for example, we try to get involved for real in the projects that the residents bring to us. So if, for example, they don't have the way to come to Buenos Aires, we try to help them. I don't know, an artist from Chile wants to come, but the artist doesn't know that in Chile there is a grant. So there is one part of the team that works helping the artists to find the grants, because we don't have like sometimes the opportunity. We give usually 5 half grants at the year, just like making movements in our economy, and it helps. But that is like the way that we try to put our intentions from the communication, from the clear communication. And another thing that I say to the residents, the artists that I apply to the program is like, okay, and about expectatives also. It's like, you wanna know about our intentions and how we work, please ask to one of the other residents, ex-residents, because I don't pay for advertising. I just have ex-residents that could tell how was their experience, and that you could check with them how, if my intentions were really good. You know, it's like, that's the way for us to work. And to also, in my team, there is one person that just works on searching like the opportunities for some artists that we really want to bring to Buenos Aires, but maybe we don't have the opportunity. So that's the way that we put on the table our intentions.
I'd be interested in knowing how providers, I'm asking a question, you know, the links to the one that's been asked, ensure that what they call good intentions aren't actually just lip service and tick boxing, and how do you make those intentions achievable objectives?
Yeah, so a move away from window shopping to actual care.
Yes.
He says, segueing neatly into the workshops that are going on in half an hour's time. And if you look at the 4 workshops that are coming up after the break, you'll see that there is actually health checks for residency providers, fairness and value, strategies for equitable collaborations, and equality, diversity, and inclusion, creating boundaries and avoiding burnout. And the last one, but it is there, boiling point, navigating conflict resolutions. So these are practical. I think it's been really interesting, actually, the stress on the practical that this panel has brought out today, and the practical things you can do to make residency providers better going forward. But we have reached, I'm afraid, the end of the Q&A. You have got half an hour. There will be these workshops. They're all taking place upstairs. I think by the time you go upstairs, on the doors of the rooms upstairs, there should be a list of those workshops and who's in them. For those people online, there is also the option of taking part in a webinar, and I'll put a slide up around that. Oh, someone's doing it remotely, and I'm not even doing that. So there's the webinar that our digital attendees can attend. But thank you so much, panel. That was fantastic. Thank you.